Why Aroldis Chapman will not be the Boston Red Sox closer by the end of the 2026 season.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Gabby Maljanian, former ESPN social media associate and currently the host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part, it's all free. So make sure that you tune in because Locked On is here for you every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the show. I will talk to you all about FanDuel a little bit later on the show, but the Red Sox had some weaknesses in their roster in 2025 for sure, but they also had some strong suits. And one of those strong suits was no doubt the Red Sox bullpen that was first in the American League in team ERA and also was second in all of Major League Baseball. So there's no mystery to the fact that the bullpen was certainly something that got the Red Sox as far as they got in the 2025 season. But on today's show, I'm going to be ranking the 2025 Red Sox bullpen, guys who stepped up when they needed to, guys who didn't step up as much when they needed to, and figuring out if it makes sense for the Red Sox to pick up a bullpen arm for the 2026 season. So there's no doubt about the fact that Aroldis Chapman was the Red Sox most reliable reliever. He had arguably the best season of his career and statistically performed a lot better than a lot of people anticipated that he would. Now, the biggest thing with Chapman over the last few seasons wasn't a lack of velocity, and it wasn't a lack of swing and miss stuff. He was still getting all of that. He was just having a lot of issues with his command. But Connor Wong was able to fix that. He said, aim small, miss small to Chapman. And then all of a sudden, Chapman was not having those command issues anymore. And it allowed him to have a 2025 season in which the Red Sox were very happy to have him and knew that if they had made a World Series run, that having him coming out of that bullpen as the closer would help them to get far and to possibly even win a championship. Now, granted, you had other holes in the roster that weren't quite there compared to some other teams that made a deeper run than they did. But Chapman, and the way that he was able to provide stability in the closer role was a huge win for this Boston Red Sox team. He went 5-3 with a 1.17 ERA over 67 games in which he made an appearance. He had 32 saves, 85 strikeouts, and a .7 whip over 61.1 innings pitched. Now, if you look at Chapman's career overall, it's been very good. He has a 60-48 overall career record with an ERA of 2.52 over 863 games with 367 saves and 1,331 strikeouts over 821.1 innings pitched. He also has a career whip of 1.08. Now, granted, all of this was great for the Boston Red Sox in 2025. He was the reliever that would go out there, and if you were a Red Sox fan, knew that Chapman was likely going to go out there and get the job done. And it felt good to have a guy like that closing games, a guy who had a lot of experience closing games, and a guy who the Red Sox knew they could rely on. So he was no doubt the guy that would put you through the least amount of roller coasters in the Red Sox bullpen, truly. But the problem with Aroldis Chapman going forward is, yes, I don't hate the fact that the Red Sox are bringing him back in for another season in 2026. The issue more is how effective is he going to be? Now, we saw him have a great season in 2025, but he's only getting older, and he's definitely approaching that point in his career where his arm is not going to be able to handle as much of a workload. Now, the Red Sox did a good job of managing him in 2025, so expect to see something similar in 2026 in terms of how the Red Sox manage Chapman. But the thing is that even if they do manage him, he is probably going to start to decline because of the fact that he is older. And there are a lot of factors you can point to say, wow, Aroldis Chapman still will be a reliable reliever for this Red Sox bullpen for sure, but this kind of creates an opening for the Red Sox to go and try somebody else out in the closer role. A setup role is definitely possible for him if his performance slips. Projective stats include an ERA of around 4.06 with an 11.0 strikeouts per 9 inning ratio and a 2.94 whip. That is a pretty decent drop from 2025. So if that were to be the case, and if those projections are correct and he does fall off that much, then I don't anticipate that he will be the closer all season long. And this gives opportunity for other Red Sox relievers to make that move into that role. Now, I do believe that the Red Sox will go into the 2026 season with the expectation that Chapman is going to be the closer again, and they'll see how he performs. And if he starts to slip back a little bit, then maybe they take him out of that role and they put somebody else there instead. But over the course of a 162 game season, it's more of a possibility to me that Chapman's numbers start to slip a little bit. I think the 2025 season he had was an anomaly. I think it was him dominating because he was really excited to be in a new place in a big market again, like he was used to with previous teams, pitching for a team that had a lot of potential. I think those were all factors in him coming to Boston. But now that first year excitement will be out of the way. And now this team is going to be more determined than ever to make a deeper playoff run than they made over the course of 2025. And Chapman will definitely be a part of that. But the biggest thing to remember here is because of the fact that we have seen him prior to 2025 have seasons that weren't exactly dominant, I could see him slipping back into that because of the fact that it felt like 2025 was his peak. So even if he's still pretty effective, which will be a win for the Red Sox, I'm not expecting him to go off and have this really drastically good season like we saw from him. I don't think he'll be in conversations of best reliever in baseball in 2025. I do think he'll still be a good reliever for this Boston Red Sox team, and his velocity certainly is still there. But as you get older, your arm just starts to get more and more fatigued. And for him, if the Red Sox continue to manage him, they could stretch him out for the whole season. But naturally, if his arm is getting tired, then he won't pitch as effectively overall. So I still do picture Chapman being a reliable piece of the Red Sox pen going into 2026. But I don't necessarily anticipate that he's going to stick in the closer role all season long because I expect a bit of a decline. And now the Red Sox have a standard. They just had a closer in 2025 who had one of the best seasons of his career and won American League Reliever of the Year. So they're going to be very picky about how their bullpen arms are performing. And particularly in that closing spot, they now see how important and valuable it is to have a guy pitching at the level he is pitching at to close out games. So if the Red Sox start him in that role, he's not performing to the level that they would necessarily need their closer to perform at, then they would reevaluate probably and say, okay, maybe he shouldn't be the closer anymore, but we can put him in the 7th or 8th inning, and then we can try somebody else out in the closer role. So there's lots of options and things that the Red Sox could do. Do they have a solidified closer for 2026? As of right now, yes. If you ask the Red Sox front office, they would probably say, yes, Aroldis is our closer. But if I'm looking at the overarching picture of what things could look like mid-season for him, when he starts to feel a little bit fatigued in his arm, his numbers could start to decline. And I don't see him having as good of a season as he had in 2025 because that was just at the top. That was really just something that we saw that it's really hard to continue to grow off of. So I anticipate a bit of a decline. His arm's just getting up there in age, and as much as he contributed in 2025, putting him into a lesser role in 2026 could end up making a lot of sense. And in that case, who ends up being the closer? I'm going to be discussing that next. If you love sports betting or you're just looking to get into it, FanDuel is 100% the place for you, with there being all kinds of different sports on this time of year. And even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you're looking to win lots of money, I promise you FanDuel is 100% the place for you. And also, thank you so much for continuing to make Locked On Red Sox your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Truly would not be able to do it without you. Are the Red Sox a World Series contending team in 2026? Possibly. Too soon to say. We have to see for sure what they do this offseason and the types of moves that they make before we can confidently say whether they are or are not. But one thing that is for certain is the fact that Aroldis Chapman provided a lot of value in the Red Sox pen as the closer, and he threw one of the best seasons of his career. And that's another thing to note with Chapman, is that was a high for him. That was one of the best seasons statistically that he has put up in his entire career, and he's on the older side. So if he did that in 2025, it's tough to assume that he's going to do that exact same thing again in 2026 and replicate that type of performance. I'm sure it'll be a situation in which maybe he comes close or he's still very effective, but I'm just not seeing him have this historic season again because he set the bar very high. So the possibility is there of Chapman being in more of a setup role in 2026 and the Red Sox bring in another reliever to be the closer, whether that's bringing in Devin Williams in free agency, who I discussed, or maybe trading for somebody, or they make somebody internally the closer who was the next most reliable and best reliever for this Red Sox team, which was Garrett Whitlock. Now, this was huge for Whitlock to be able to be healthy because in the past, his health has been a major concern. He was a guy who it was hard to envision him being able to stay on the field. And coincidentally, once the Red Sox stopped trying to make him a starting pitcher, he all of a sudden was healthy again and is now at the point where he was healthy. He was pitching well in 2025. And he was a guy that the Red Sox could say, wow, we can trust him to pitch in relief in high leverage situations in our bullpen. So when you're looking at the ranking of these relief pitchers, it definitely goes Chapman first, and then it goes Whitlock second, because he's a guy who the Red Sox could throw in the 7th or 8th inning of a close game, and then he could keep the Red Sox lead and then pass the baton over to Aroldis Chapman to close it out in the 9th inning. So that's a great quality to have, is because you need a guy who's going to be that reliable. You need a guy who's going to be that second-hand man next to your closer, who's going to come in and take care of business in those close games before you leave it to your closer to come out and get the job done in the 9th inning. And Garrett Whitlock certainly provided that stability for this Red Sox team. And stability is a key word here, because with all the injuries that the Red Sox had over the course of the 2025 season, they really needed reliability, and they would sub in all kinds of players to get reps when guys were injured, and guys who we didn't normally see were getting their shot, which is great. But you definitely need to be able to look back and say you have your truly reliable arms that you know are going to be the guys that are putting the most consistently good performances together. And Garrett Whitlock certainly fell into that category in regards to what he did for this Boston Red Sox team. So there is a world that I see in which Garrett Whitlock fills those shoes as the closer for the Boston Red Sox. He's a lot younger than Chapman. He has a proven track record of success as a reliever. He feels most comfortable in the bullpen. which is something the Red Sox had seen firsthand over the course of the 2025 season. He's a guy that the Red Sox really value and feel like has a ton of potential moving forward. And if Aroldis Chapman starts to slip, he is a guy that I very much could see the Red Sox deciding to slot in there and say, well, why don't we have Whitlock close out games? Would not be surprised if the Red Sox were to come to that conclusion. He was certainly very reliable for this Boston Red Sox team. Next, in terms of reliability for the Boston Red Sox bullpen, I definitely have to go with Brennan Bernardino. He got sent down to AAA late in the season, but that wasn't necessarily due to performance. It was more due to the fact that the Red Sox wanted to give him some rest because he had been overused. He and Greg Weissert were two relievers that the Red Sox were truly overworking over the course of the 2025 season, and Alex Cora was in a tough place with it because if the starters weren't providing the length that they really needed to, and he had to go to a reliever to try to pitch a couple innings so that he didn't have to waste everybody. Oftentimes in that middle part of the game, he would go to Weissert or Bernardino. And Bernardino did start to struggle a little bit later on, and that does have to do a lot with the fact that he was fatigued and he didn't really have the best opportunity to be able to continue to pitch well. So the Red Sox thought process was, okay, we're going to send him down to AAA, give his arm a little bit of a break. But he's definitely valuable to this Red Sox pen because in terms of consistency, he was right up there with Whitlock and Chapman in terms of being able to get the job done when he was out there. And he hasn't always had seasons like this. We have seen seasons in which Bernardino has struggled, but this season in 2025 was not one of those seasons for him. And it's great to think about having a guy like that who you have as a stable arm in your pen because he also helps with the variety of arms that you have in the pen because the Red Sox bullpen didn't have a ton of lefties in it, but Brennan Bernardino is a left-handed pitcher. So for him, he was able to help balance that out with the right-handed arms that they had. So there's definitely some upsides to having him in the pen. And he's a guy who I still see pitching in high leverage for this Boston Red Sox team. As long as they are able to manage him again, it's just like Chapman. He's a guy who the Red Sox are going to have to be careful with in terms of when he's used, because the thing is that if they value him as a relief arm, they don't want to overuse him again and then have the quality of his performances go down. So the thing that they're going to have to figure out here is, does it make sense for the Red Sox to rely on him as a multi-inning guy, or is he going to be a one-inning guy? That's the biggest thing I'm looking at with Brennan Bernardino here. I truly feel like he's much better off as a one-inning in relief type of pitcher, but the Red Sox might try to push that a little bit because they want guys to come out of the pen who can pitch multiple innings. But Brennan Bernardino has to be third on my list in terms of bullpen reliability. Now, the next one is a guy who didn't really come to this team until later in the season, and that is Steven Matz, who the Red Sox traded for at the trade deadline and ended up being good in the Red Sox pen. He was a guy they could go to, that they could rely on, and overall was good. Yes, he had a couple blunders like everybody does. Just a reminder at the end of the day that these players are human first. So yes, he had his blunders and things weren't necessarily always going his way, but a lot more often than not, things were going his way. And when they were going his way, it was great to witness because it felt like the Red Sox at least added a quality addition at the trade deadline, because of the fact that the Red Sox trade deadline as a whole was underwhelming because they only got Matz and Dustin May, and Dustin May didn't really end up panning out. At least Matz was a saving grace because he was able to come in a lot of close games and pitch around base traffic and help the Red Sox out. So having Steven Matz around was certainly helpful. Obviously, they traded for him as a rental piece. So it's definitely a bummer because that's a piece that you feel like the Red Sox could use longer term. But in terms of what he did personally for the Red Sox in the second half of the season, I have to put him in that spot in terms of reliability when it comes to ranking this pen, because I can't speak enough on the fact that reliability is the most important thing when it comes to the bullpen. And we have seen plenty of relievers come through this Boston Red Sox team that have come at the trade deadline, and have not performed. For example, the season before that in 2024, when Craig Breslow traded for 2 relievers at the trade deadline, and they both did not pitch well for this Boston Red Sox team, even though the numbers were certainly there and it was easy to feel good about these guys, they didn't really perform at the level that they needed to perform at or that the Red Sox were hoping they would perform at. So then the risk came when they got Steven Matz that, hey, he was solid prior to coming to Boston. Hopefully he can continue that. And luckily for the Red Sox, he was generally able to continue that and was able to be a guy that the Red Sox could rely on consistently on a regular basis to go out there and get the job done. So I really liked Matz. That's a high leverage arm that they are going to have to look to replace or are going to have to consider trying to explore all of their options and figure out who is reliable, because there's a big difference between relievers who should be pitching in low leverage and relievers who should be pitching in high leverage. And there's usually a pretty distinct line between the two. If you can't handle the pressure, you have to pitch in the lower leverage situations when there's not nearly as much pressure on you. But the Red Sox could put Steven Matz in those high leverage situations and he can go out there and get the job done. Had a couple big moments in the postseason for Boston. So I really appreciated what he did. And he definitely is up there in terms of reliability. And coming up, what does the rest of the Red Sox bullpen look like in terms of where guys stand in their reliability in 2025? Thank you so much for always making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every day. I do have another exciting announcement that the Locked On Network is actually launching a subtext campaign where you can subscribe to get exclusive Red Sox content from me. For example, a lot of the player and coach interviews that I get, those you can get exclusively by being a subscriber, get access to a lot of Red Sox breaking news. And what is also a cool feature is you get a one-on-one texting opportunity service with just me directly to get all of your Red Sox questions answered. So rather than battling with other people to get those questions answered, you can reach out to me directly and I will be getting back to you to tell you about what I know or what's to come. So you should head to Subtext and subscribe to Locked On Red Sox on it. The link is in the YouTube episode video for today, but it's going to be a good time with lots of insider content. So I highly recommend you checking that out. And also, if you're looking for a second listen, be sure to check out Locked On MLB with host Paul Sullivan, aka Sully. He does a great job covering all things across Major League Baseball. So if you're looking to stay up to date with everything going on, his show 100% should be the next place that you go. You can find that on YouTube or any other podcast platform. Just search Locked On MLB, and Sully, aka Paul Sullivan, will have you covered, especially during this offseason when moves are starting to be made. If you want to stay informed on what's going on with other teams, definitely check that show out. Josh Naylor just went back to the Mariners. Who's going to be the next big domino to fall? You can find out with Locked On MLB. And speaking of dominoes falling, the Red Sox need to have some dominoes fall this offseason because they need to make some moves to make them a World Series contending team in 2026. And the question is going to be, what exactly is that going to take? What kinds of moves do the Red Sox need to make in order to show that they are no doubt a World Series contender? Starting pitching and 1 to 2 power bats to add to that lineup. Those are no secret that they are the moves the Red Sox need to make the most. But what about the relief market? Because Craig Breslow did say a little bit that he was going to be keeping his options open and at least exploring the relief market to see what's out there. It's not necessarily the Red Sox priority, but it's not something they're opposed to either if the right situation arose for them to acquire a reliever. But when it comes to ranking the Red Sox bullpen, they definitely had their high leverage arms. And the next guy that I would throw in there that overall was reliable was Justin Slayton. Now, he had his bumps in the road late in the season, especially after getting hurt. And one of my biggest concerns when it comes to Slayton is being able to stay healthy, because over the last couple seasons, he has missed a good chunk of time due to injury. So my biggest thing now is going to be, is Justin Slayton going to be healthy for 2026 and beyond? Because if he is, and he has his best stuff, he is nearly unhittable. But there's a couple different extremes with him, because when he doesn't have it, it can be really bad. Now, Slayton wasn't a guy who had a lot of bad outings, but he definitely wasn't up there in that top tier of guys who were consistently putting together the best performances every single time they were out there. And now, again, like I said, I'm giving him some grace because of his injuries, but I do have to put him there because he was definitely more reliable than some of the other relievers that the Red Sox did have, but he wasn't necessarily a guy that I would put at the top in terms of saying, yeah, he's the guy I would trust the most out of the Red Sox pen. Nothing like that, but I definitely would rank Justin Slayton there. Now, in terms of other relievers that the Red Sox did have, they had Richard Fitts, who spent some time both in the starting rotation and as a reliever, and same with Kyle Harrison and Peyton Tolley. These were all guys who the Red Sox kind of bounced around. I would definitely put Richard Fitts up there next in terms of reliability because, yes, he got hurt, but when he was pitching, he overall was pitching pretty well, especially when he was in the pen. Now, Richard Fitts, the starter, certainly struggled in 2025. And again, we can maybe point to the injury as part of that. But Richard Fitts, the reliever, unlocked something really good. And that's why I wonder if the Red Sox are going to continue to have him throw in relief. I think he's better off in short stints, and maybe him being a starter just isn't as good for him because once opposing teams figure him out, he doesn't really know how to adapt to that. But he's a guy I'm very intrigued by because he's bounced around between relief pitching and starting pitching. So I'm curious to see where they're going to put him in 2026 if he's healthy, because the Red Sox do have a lot that they have to think about in terms of their pitching staff heading into this upcoming season. So he's somebody that I would put in that spot. And then another reliever who surprisingly had a really good season was Zach Kelly. He was a guy who was more reliable than I expected him to be. And I'm not going to jump to conclusions here and say that'll happen again in 2026, but you have to feel good about what you saw from him in 2025. And hopefully he continues to grow on that next season because he seemed to unlock something new in himself that we hadn't really seen from him in the past, because in the past he has major struggles. And if he's able to go into 2026 and overall pitch a lot better than people expected, that would be a win for the Red Sox bullpen. So Zach Kelly is next on my list. Now, you look at some guys who really struggled. I mean, Kyle Harrison definitely didn't struggle. A little bit of a small sample size for him and for Peyton Tolley, so it doesn't necessarily feel as fair to include them in these rankings because we just haven't seen a lot of them yet. And it's hard to compare them to a guy like Aroldis Chapman because they just pitched far less than they did. So I'm kind of leaving them out of this list just for right now for the sake of this exercise, just because it's way too small a sample size there with them. But one of them could be on the move this offseason. I think Peyton Tolley is a likely trade piece for the Red Sox. That's definitely something to be on the lookout for. But then there's Chris Murphy, who definitely was very hit or miss. He was pitching well and then wasn't. Well, and then wasn't. And then he got hurt. And then he got sent back down to AAA because he couldn't get his command under control. And he's always been very off and on from what we've seen from him. This isn't the first time that this happened. We have seen past seasons in which Murphy just was inconsistent. And we saw that again with him in 2025. And when he didn't have it, he really didn't have it, could not find the strike zone. And that was frustrating to watch. So that's why I have to put Chris Murphy towards the bottom in terms of reliability. Greg Weisser is a hard one because he was a guy who definitely had his moments and was very reliable, especially earlier on in the season when the Red Sox were utilizing him a lot. He truly stepped up. And then later on in the season, things started to slip for him because he was feeling fatigued. He finished the season with a 6-6 record, a 2.82 ERA over 72 games that he pitched in. He also recorded 4 saves and had 57 strikeouts over 67 innings pitched with a whip of 1.16. So his numbers slowly started to decline as the season went on. And I'm not saying that he's bottom tier in terms of reliability. I just feel like I would take other Red Sox relievers over him, especially because of the fact that later on in the season, he wasn't really able to get out of jams as effectively as we saw from him earlier on. So I would be worried to see that happen again and him trending in that direction again in 2026. So Greg Weisser, to me, isn't as reliable. If you consider his first half of the season and weigh that more heavily, then absolutely he would be a lot higher up on the list. But because of the fact that it seemed like he was getting fatigued towards the end of the season and he wasn't as effective, it bumped down where I put him on this list. Now, again, you do have guys who switched into different roles for this Red Sox team. You could even say Cooper Criswell, who pitched in relief and also started, but didn't really do a whole lot of either for the major league team and spent a lot of the season in AAA. But Jordan Hicks has to be at the bottom for me in terms of relievers. I mean, this guy, it was like pulling teeth watching him. No command, and just got himself into so many messes that it was nearly impossible for another reliever to get it out. I mean, it was just so frustrating because you'd have to put somebody else in and be like, good luck getting out of this one. And it just didn't really happen. Hicks just did not have the command or control to be able to pitch well at the major league level. And it's tough because the Red Sox acquired him in the Rafael Devers trade. They're hoping that he really pans out. But I just don't see a world right now in which I could possibly put Jordan Hicks higher on the list because he didn't really show a lot of redeeming qualities in 2025. Granted, every pitcher has strengths and weaknesses, but for him, it feels like the weaknesses list is very long and the strengths list is short. That's something the Red Sox are going to need to figure out. They are probably adamant on making things work with him and him figuring it out because of the fact that he was a big piece they got back for Rafael Devers. So they don't want to sit here and admit defeat in a trade like that. So they definitely will try to make it work with him. But he was so incredibly disappointing upon coming to Boston. And it just never got better. I was trying to give him chance after chance after chance, but he had to get pulled from so many games because of the mess that he created. So it's a little scary thinking about him going into 2026. But again, every well-balanced pen has some lefties, some righties, some guys who can pitch in high leverage, some guys who should be pitching in low leverage. And the Red Sox definitely do have a good mix, but my concern still is who are going to be those pitchers that can pitch in the 6th or 7th inning before you go to Whitlock and Chapman. That's the biggest question mark that I have going into 2026 when it comes to the bullpen. But those were generally the mainstays in the bullpen. Granted, obviously, with some guys going in and out due to injury and everything else, but that's kind of where those rankings are. There's no doubt about the fact that Aroldis Chapman was the best reliever for this team. And there's no doubt about the fact that he'll probably be good again in 2026. The only thing is just don't bank on him having the same caliber of season as we saw him have in 2025. So we'll see how everything plays out, but thank you so much for tuning into Locked On Red Sox and making it your first listen of every single day. And as always, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I'll catch you on the flip side.